Hi fam, happy Advent. And we're gonna find out who's naughty and nice, cause Santa Claus is coming to town. So there's been some comments about gentle parenting and being a parent myself, thinking about like plans for parenting. Like the peers of mine who are parents, so like precious 1-year-olds. This is exciting. Like the thing about Christmas is like a pretty exciting time. It's for the kids and the parents as well as the kids. I guess there's been some comments from people in the world though that gentle parenting isn't so bad. I guess there's a misunderstanding what we mean by gentle parenting. But based on what's trending on TikTok and all that jazz, I get the impression that that's not the path that I want to go with my children, and maybe even go so far as to say that's not the path I would want anyone to go with their children. It's kind of gone in the direction of what some might say passive parenting, where you're like almost as bad as passive parenting, where you just let the kid do whatever they want. You get the facade that you're actually trying to parent by saying like negotiating with them and treating them like peers and saying like, do you understand why you're getting punished and all that jazz? Like I know some kids will ask like, why am I grounded for a week and all that? And it's not necessarily that they don't understand, but that like they think it's so unfair because like from their undeveloped minds they just don't grasp like the wrong that they did, and they're just living in the moment. So it is important to like, kind of understand the child psychology. They're not your peers because their minds literally are less developed, and they're dependent on you as a parent to help form them as their minds develop, but also, especially develop their souls. So there's that issue there. And then as a parent, you have a special authority over your kids that nobody else has. But another thing along the lines of gentle parenting that I found interesting is the response and reaction from teachers. And there's so much that could be said about school teachers. I mean, some of my friends and peers were or are school teachers. And just thinking about how it is unfortunate that, it's important to like support teachers and all that good stuff. And again, like I said, lots to be said about teachers. But it seemed like they were almost put on a pedestal, kind of like there was an imbalance. Like sometimes we like take teachers for granted, but then sometimes we put them on a pedestal and say like, they're better than parents at educating children. The argument out there was sort of like it's better for them to go to public school and be taught by these teachers because they're professionally educated and all that. And to see the pendulum sort of sway, like again, I'm glad that there's like no talking down or smacking down teachers in any way. But this idea like you kind of put teachers on a pedestal and kind of talk smack about parents for a long time. And now the parents are, for different reasons, unrelated reason, kind of being more lax and doing the gentle parenting kind of pathway. Like, I could see like, parents are human, so they make mistakes. And so then, in general, I would want to discipline my children. I would follow that sort of similar path that my parents did, but then there's certain things that my parents specifically did that I would want to avoid doing, and maybe I wouldn't be as strict in the sense like I would punish my kids like for everything that they do in the same way, like the type of punishment that I execute. I do believe that the corporal physical punishment can be used on a kid, but might not use it as much as my parents did. I think people are familiar with the spanking, and there's a controversy about that. There's supposed to be some research that could be harmful, and a lot of people say they're traumatized by that, but it's hard to say. I think that maybe I wouldn't punish them that way physically, but there might be some benefit in certain cases for the kid to be disciplined and punished corporally, and that's like physically, but maybe not. That's not the best answer. I would probably avoid that as much as possible. I think there's different forms of punishment. What we learned in like biology and psychology, basic biology and psychology is that there is rewards and punishment. Positive punishment, positive reward is like positive in the psychological sense, means like to add something. Negative means to take away something. So it's kind of confusing. Like negative punishment, negative reward. So you encourage a behavior by either positive reward or negative reward. By taking something away that is uncomfortable, that would be like a negative reward. A positive reward is something people are more familiar with, like, oh, the dog does what you want. He sits when he's telling him to sit. So you give them a dog treat. That's a positive reward. And again, children are superior to animals, but there's a similarity in the development there and in training a kid. But a lot of times it's like positive punishment where you would smack your dog, you smack your kid if they misbehaved, and finding for both dogs and kids, again, different kind of a creature there, but there's parallels when it comes to like the psychological sort of behavioral side of things, and I'm finding like, positive punishment may not be as effective. In fact, it actually isn't as effective if you look at the research for animals or for kids. It can traumatize kids. It can discourage kids and maybe have a more serious effect than intended. Not only do they say like, no, I shouldn't take the cookie from the table because I'll get punished for it. They become afraid, and that fear goes far beyond like avoiding eating cookies off the table kind of thing. Like they don't want to be seen anymore. They want to express themselves anymore. Dogs don't want to approach the human anymore because they're afraid they'll be punished for anything they do. And likewise, the kid will be afraid to act anymore because they're afraid of anything. If they do anything without permission first, they'll be punished for it, or like they should be afraid of the parents, and I don't want to go that direction. But obviously, don't go to extreme. Let them do whatever they want. The dog shouldn't be allowed to tear up the whole couch, and the kids shouldn't just be able to make a whole mess of the house, eat a bunch of junk food, and make themselves sick. Maybe sometimes there will be like a natural consequence of their actions, but a lot of times for the kids' well-being, and just because they're just so naive and young, it's not worth the risk of just letting them suffer the consequences of their own actions. So I'm not going to be passive ever, but I won't be like as aggressive or instill as much what would be considered positive punishment. It would have to be like in very specific scenarios. So the punishment probably would be more like a negative punishment where you take something away, take something that they like you took the cookie from the table, the cookie jar, whatever. So there's not going to be any cookies for a week for you, or like there's this batch of cookies, it's not yours. You can't have any more. And maybe something else on top of that, like, is taken away. Just to drive home the point that you need to respect your parents, and that you can't overindulge in things that could harm you. But it gets more complex with humans. Like they have to eventually get to the point where you like acknowledge like what it is they did and where they went wrong. And that doesn't mean like you go soft on the punishment, which I've seen with some of the TikToks and the gentle parenting where they're like, does it sound good to you that you get punished for 2 weeks for being disrespectful in class or whatever have you? Yeah, like we want them to understand why they're getting punished, especially for like teenagers, where they're that age of reason. But then that doesn't mean like, oh, you understand why you were punished, so let's just throw away the punishment. No, you have to actually stick with it. Unless it's like a serious mistake, which I wouldn't think like grounding somebody is a serious mistake. I think it's important to be consistent with that and be like, oh yeah, my actions actually do have consequences. And I'd rather have my kid grounded for 2 weeks than to make them think that they can sort of like negotiate with the court and the justice and the police. Like, they will not show mercy. We parents will show mercy, but the children will not. And so, like, your actions have consequences. There's a punishment. You need to respect those in authority. You need to respect your parents. And we won't go soft on you because we know how harsh the justice system in our world will be. Somebody will not go soft on you. Somebody will show you no mercy. They don't care about your well-being, and they will just have you punished and show no mercy, no compassion whatsoever. So we'll try to train you as best we can in at the home and in this environment, so that when you're out in the real world, you recognize that there are consequences for your actions. Again, like, I don't want kids to be submissive to everything, because obviously the world is full of immorality, and some things that are legal are not necessarily moral, nor should they be legal. Definitely clear about that. Activists online and social media and that. Like, but you want to raise them to be moral people and to avoid getting into legal situations unnecessarily where they will show you no mercy, because that's how it is in the real world. The real world, I think, regardless of your race, will most likely show no mercy. Like, things have sometimes changed. Sometimes people are a tad too compassionate and too merciful towards people. But as it is right now, I feel like, no, the world won't show you mercy if you make a mistake, or if you do something erroneous or immoral and illegal. So you need to learn that now. And if it's an unjust law, I would also want you to learn how to have the courage to fight for what is true and what's just and moral, but also to have the self-discipline to not do anything illegal, unnecessary, or immoral, so that the world will show you no mercy for. And then on top of that, of course, I will appreciate that my parents disciplined me so that I can grow in self-discipline and have control over my behavior in life, and not go completely wild and off the rails as an adult and just indulge in whatever I wanted until I make myself sick and then learn the hard way. So I appreciate that, and just have general self-control over myself. That's something I appreciate. And again, I think no matter how good your parents are in raising you, that they're humans, so they're not going to be perfect. And there's those things to watch out for. For the most part, I would say, like, I would follow their methods of raising my child. There's a couple things I might leave out, but I understand the importance, like, of training my child now. And then, of course, I made a vow, like, I will be open to children. I want to raise those children in the faith, and that means forming them morally. But even if I wasn't like a practicing Catholic or Catholic at all, I wouldn't want my kids to grow up without any self-control, just for the peace of mind in their own lives. But on top of that, like, getting themselves in trouble, which would be miserable, and then being punished by the world that will show them no compassion or mercy. So that's important. And obviously we want them to be good, decent people and kind to others. So, like, growing in a virtue, avoiding vice, and having controlled virtue. It is, I guess, easier said than done, but it is something to keep in mind. And the one thing that comes to mind, besides, how we can understand parenting and like gentle parenting, I understand it isn't the way to go if it's defined as sort of like treating your kids as if they're peers and fully formed adults, even though they're not fully formed, because physically, literally not fully developed in the brain. But on top of that, they're still being formed at home. That's why they're being raised by their parents, and at least in 18, and then it's covered that the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until they're 25, so there's that. But legally, there's a reason why they're not considered adults, because they're still developing as human beings. They're still developing their self-discipline, their morals, their identity, and everything. So there needs to be some parental guidance there. Never mind that under the age of 18, how naive they are, how underdeveloped they are mentally, emotionally, that it could cause they could cause harm to themselves or other people, most likely to themselves, that we would want to avoid as loving parents. And we want them to grow up to be good people, good, kind people, and that has to start at home. Yeah, to avoid not only the vices, but grow in virtue, and help them grow in virtue, and be those examples. So I should think that we would do that for my daughter, my husband and I. What I thought was interesting, confession, like for most of my education was homeschooled, but I find it interesting when it comes to public schooling or private schooling and sending your kid off to be taught publicly, like how even they're reacting to this. I don't think they go too far. Like sometimes I feel like it's like the parents are going too far, criticizing the teachers. Sometimes the teachers could be tempted to go too far and criticize the parents and say, I don't think it's necessarily teachers, but they're people supportive public schools and that who kind of put up teachers in a pedestal, but recognizing that ultimately it's teamwork, it's team effort here. If I were to send my kid to school instead of schooling them myself, regardless of that, actually, we should see teachers as teammates and partners in forming our children. Hopefully, number one in education. Well, I'm number one in virtue, but there's only so much they can do in that. But their role, the reason they're getting paid, is to form them intellectually, form their minds. But we would hope that they would complement that with morals and virtues, or at least support how we want to raise them in terms of religion and virtue, and ultimately that there's like some sort of partnership, some sort of teamwork. We're supposed to work as a team in forming these young minds. But the main role, the key players are, of course, the parents. We're the number one formers of the mind, and it's important to recognize that, any way you slice it, that even if we aren't educated and trained into how to teach our kids, and feel the need, like you're better off being sent to public school or private school to be educated properly, that we are still the number one educators and formers of the children's minds, no matter if we ourselves are very educated or not. And that's very, very well understood. And we see with the gentle parenting movement how the kids are being disruptive in class, and how the teachers are starting to talk about that, and like hoping, like, hey, discipline your children at home, please. Like they're being really unruly, and there's only so much they can do. Their hands are tied. Like the teachers kind of have this ability to be more gentle. I mean, it's not only taboo and I figure illegal for them to physically punish children like they used to. And it's probably for the best that it stays that way, that you can't like physically slap a child with a ruler anymore. Like that may be the teacher going too far, and then their abuse of their authority, but they still need to like punish the children, discipline the children, but the main authority in their lives is their parents. So of course they need the parents to step up and discipline them. And if they're not being disciplined at home, then of course that will reflect in school, and is reflecting in school, and the teachers are kind of getting frustrated with that, and they're getting strained with that. It's like they have enough to deal with. But we took for granted that there's supposed to be a partnership between parents and teachers, and on top of that, the gentle parenting movement doesn't help. but we're starting to realize, this is just kind of like a sign that maybe gentle parenting isn't the right direction to go. But on top of that, it made me think about how teachers are kind of put on a pedestal because they're quote unquote like educated. And yeah, they did go through an education process. They did go through a lot of training and work to learn how to form young minds. And I appreciate that about them. But it's unfortunate, like, we're trying to lift up teachers at the expense of parents and kind of downplay parents and their role. And now it's kind of coming back to haunt them because they didn't say, well, yeah, it's important. Yeah, I worked hard to get these credentials to teach these kids, but it wouldn't work without the parents cooperating and to recognize the parents' willingness to sacrifice that time with their child and the noble act of the parents to entrust us with their child to form their minds is just to recognize and respect that and realize like what a privilege it is for us to be granted entrusted with these children. We are responsible for these children, and that the parents deserve some respect and appreciation as well as the teachers. But sadly, I feel like the parents were kind of downplayed in the name of showing appreciation for teachers or promoting teachers or supporting teachers instead of like recognizing how we should be working together for the forming of our children. And it is sad that some teachers might have a bit of an ego. Some are just so loving and compassionate and selfless. And then there's some that have like this ego about them, that they think they deserve to form our children, that our children are their children and things like that. And I can kind of see how naturally like, you kind of almost adopt these children, but you're their mentor, you're not their parent. And maintaining that healthy sort of mindset and boundary is important to understand, like, okay, yes, I'm entrusted with these children, but their parents or their authority, their role is superior to my role as a teacher. Yes, it's like a privilege and a great responsibility to form these young minds and to use my education, my talent, my skills to form those minds. And yes, I appreciate teachers' work and efforts and everything they have to go through to raise these young minds, considering how chaotic it can be and stressful, and having such a large kid to teacher ratio, and their authority is naturally limited because they're teachers, they're not parents. And if the parents are kind of downplaying their own authority, then that's going to trickle down to the teachers. And I would hope it wouldn't have to get to that point where it's affecting the teachers and the schools, for them to wake up and realize like the importance and the role of parents, and that maybe we shouldn't scoff at and downplay parents and their role, whether they're educated or not. And you would think you would want to empower parents to educate their children, but yeah, in the name of downplaying parents and trying to upplay teachers and kind of downplay homeschooling and all that, they rather like promote teachers, people who are at first strangers, to educate your children. Well, they're educated strangers, so that makes it better. Again, some of them are very kind. Lots of peers and friends who are teachers, who have good hearts for these kids. But sadly, in the world, I've noticed that there's kind of like almost like a mockery of parents and taking them for granted. And it's kind of like, this is kind of what you get. Not only like people kind of rebelling against how harsh their parents, or how they perceived how harsh their parents were. Maybe parents were actually rather harsh, but at least how they perceive the parents to be harsh kind of resulted in them adopting this gentle parenting, which is now impacting teachers and causing them to speak out. It's impactful that they feel the need to speak out about it. And I think that, yeah, their opinion, their experience matters. They should be able to speak about it. But it kind of is just upsetting because the parents have always been downplayed or taken for granted up until this point. Even though I'm sure lots of parents supported teachers and wanting to fund them and to show appreciation for them. It's like, you know why you don't get an apple anymore or whatever, a little present around Christmas time, or just because, oh, you're such a great teacher, because the parents are now taking anybody in authority for granted. If they take themselves for granted, then why wouldn't they take somebody with less authority, like a teacher, for granted? It's like you're just play a smaller but still important role in the forming of these young minds than the parents do. And if the parents don't see themselves as the authority figures in their children's lives, then why would they try to train their kids to be respectful of authority figures, other authority figures in their life? But yeah, I think maybe because some teachers weren't parents, they never gave it much of a thought when it came to how downplayed parents were when we were promoting teachers. And I'm hoping things are swinging around where they're like, yeah, we are partners in this. Our role is smaller than their role. Our role is still important, but not as important as your role as a parent to form these children. And maybe we've been overhyped a little bit. Like, yeah, we have this education. Yeah, we work hard to take care of a higher number of kids than you do. But like, you care more about your kids than we do. You are gonna invest more of your time. We get paid to invest our time on your kids. And we do it because we care about the future generations, but ultimately the parents are the role models, the formers of children in the next generation. And second to that would be the teachers. So I would hope there's some more recognition for parents. I do myself think, like, having been homeschooled and wanting to homeschool, would hope that I can do that, and that we can empower parents to educate their children. I am educated. Like, I don't know if I need like a teaching credential for people to view me as equal, but sadly for a long time, it's kind of like, well, unless you go to a university to educate people, even though that's not exactly how teaching works. I mean, yeah, there's a little more schooling for becoming a teacher historically, but it's like, women have been teachers for the longest of time for children. And if a single woman can do this, why can't a married woman do this? Why can't a married woman with kids do this? And again, I'm going to invest more of my time. I care more about my children than this. Maybe I don't have that same education, but I could. And why aren't we empowering parents to homeschool their children? I'm like, I appreciate teachers very much and would like to become one for my child. So I just want to form her body and mind and spirit and soul to the best of my ability. That would include forming her mind. And I want to be able to trust teachers. I want us to be able to support teachers, regardless if I choose to homeschool or not. Even though I'm choosing and preferring homeschooling over going to public or private school. Like, there's a need for somebody else who's educated to help guide her. There's ways maybe they can guide her that I can't. And but I found that, like, being homeschooled, like, there's room for independence. Being homeschooled, the program that I did allow me to connect with teachers who specialize in certain fields. Like, there's literature, science, and all that, whom I could actually discuss, like, my lessons with. Like, most of it I would just read online, or at first I think they had like a printed out book and I read through it, and then there's like a workbook as well. But in a lot of ways, it teaches independence and self-discipline. But on the other hand, there was like support there from educated people, so it wasn't so. So I think there's certain stereotypes out there for homeschooling where it's like, well, it's just the mom all on her own, and she doesn't have any background in this or that field, and she's struggling with this or that field. But like I would think like there would be resources out there, and you should be able to feel comfortable with reaching out for a tutor and be part of a community where there's some women who are like in biology, and some that are in mathematics, some that are I guess this could be fathers as well, chemistry and physics and all that good stuff. And that we aren't just like islands, isolated and totally helpless, and we are competent enough, educated enough to understand when we might need help with the homeschooling process, besides like reading books ourselves and trying to figure out these complex fields. But I had that educated background. Might need a refresher, but like I guess teachers can like afford that more. They have like a curriculum to work with. They're paid to like develop a course for the semester, and they're asked to focus on these things, versus I have to focus on so many different aspects of my child and my child's care that might impact like forming her mentally, and maybe I would need help outside of myself and resources I can find in literature myself to help form her mind. But I found that it is possible. There's a lot of programs there that homeschoolers can be more empowered, and it's unfortunately that's kind of homeschooling is kind of lax. It's like, yeah, I can teach your kid to become more independent, but they have to have that discipline instilled into them. And it's not every day is going to be pajama day. If you let that happen, that probably wouldn't help much with the homeschooling thing. And if you're going to be a homeschooler, you would want to know what you're talking about, and make sure that the resources are helpful enough, and if not, like to actually seek professionals and a homeschool network where you can connect to people who can help you educate your child and form their minds properly. And I feel like the stereotype is that like we're like isolated and we are just shuttering ourselves in kind of thing, and like just all these cons, no pros. Like actually have some like we can develop some sort of independence and try to have that balance of like independence, but also seeking help when we need it, and growing ourselves as parents and informing these young minds, making sure they're performed properly, and understanding that we do need community. And just because we're homeschooled doesn't mean that we can go without community. And in fact, that homeschoolers do have a community. There's a lot of homeschool communities out there, and that we encourage that our kids meet other kids and develop friendships and community. And regardless if my kid is homeschooled and all her peers aren't, and like my friends with their kids go to like a private or public school, that doesn't mean that they can't still hang out and still socialize either. So like they get to hang out and socialize with other homeschoolers, but they also get to hang out and socialize with kids who might go to a regular school, whatever that means. But like to have the benefit of handing down knowledge to my child, informing her the best I can. And if the best isn't what we consider good enough, like to search for the resources and help that we need. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate that stereotypes about homeschooling not only affects public schoolers, but I do see it like affecting homeschoolers as well in the homeschool community, and parents kind of think, well, I'm homeschooling my kid, so everything's all good and dandy. And you don't actually have to try to be more proactive to make sure that they find a community where they can socialize, and you have to be proactive to make sure that they become more independent and disciplined or self-sufficient and disciplined enough to at least not make every day pajama day, and beyond that, to do their homework and not just coast. It's not an excuse for parents to be lazy or for their kids to be lazy either. But that's kind of what happens. Like, oh, well, if you have a kid at home, you're all good. And that automatically or naturally, they'll develop self-discipline and get all their homework done and get out of their pajamas. Like, that's something you have to instill in them. And it's not going to happen automatically just because you homeschool them. And they're not just automatically become smarter, more critical thinkers, just because they're at home all the time. You actually have to make sure that they're reading their educational material and doing the work. So with homeschooling, it seems like people are like, well, if you are homeschooling your child, like somehow magically you'll know how to educate them on everything, and they'll learn everything naturally. But I think there's importance to keep in mind that you might need help outside of yourself, and although you are the primary educator, you have limits. You know what they are, and you should be able to seek out help to make sure your children have the best education they can have. And I don't think like homeschooling is an excuse to like opt out from seeking help of others and people who are educated in certain fields more than you. So we see that we actually have to be more proactive. So it's not an excuse to be more lax, and I'm not going to say that if you have to send your kid or you choose to send your kid to a public school or private school, that you are more lax. You got to be proactive as much as any parent on making sure the minds are formed properly, but just having that direct interaction with my child is something that I appreciate. Like sharing in that growing and discovering of knowledge, having had that experience, and recognizing the pros as well as the cons, and how to make sure that my child develops properly. And I can understand like people maybe they don't have the time or the education or what have you, where they feel like they can provide the best education for their child themselves, and that they need to send their child to a public or private school. But I think like I would hope that most parents feel empowered that they can do that, and then they don't find sending them to public or private education as an excuse to be more laxed on their kids and saying like, well, they're being educated by educated people, so therefore they're all good. So the stereotypes about homeschoolers and about public and private schoolers could contaminate our parenting and make us fail to realize how important it is for us to make an effort to form the minds of our children, and not to take it for granted and just shrug it off and say like, well, they're being educated by educated people, so therefore they're fine. Like, we have a big role to play in this. We're the primary educators and developers of our children. So we can't take a back seat to this, and we shouldn't be passive about this. And that's my 10 cents about that. So if there are any other thoughts, I would say, like, have you had the impression, I guess my question would be is if you had the impression that parents were kind of downplayed, like educators, yeah, I want to support them. I think they should be supported by all means, even though like my education mainly was like homeschool education. So the only teacher one of the key teachers in my life was my mom, And even if I had several other teachers, I did have a handful of teachers in public school, did take some public schooling. Like even them, like, yeah, I appreciate what they did to help me. There's other, yeah, other things that could be said about you caring more about your children than the teachers do. Again, I try to think about like all the good, positive things about teachers. Yes, there's cons as well, where like I was taken for granted. Okay, so like it makes sense that yeah, you're getting out of public school. Like they've gotten better. They gotten better where they wouldn't take a kid for granted and lose a kid, which they did with me, in the public school. So there's that, but there's other issues as well, mainly the morality side of things that dissuade from sending people like sending my children to public school or private school even, and on top of that, it is like, you know, nobody's gonna care about my kid as much as I do. And if there's a teacher that's out there saying that they care about my kid as much as I do, that's disturbing and erroneous. And I can't believe they would say that, but they're not, as far as I'm aware of. And then on top of that, like the morality, they'll try to form my kid's mind, but how will they form them morally? Will they express immorality? Will they promote immorality? Will they support the virtues and the faith that I want to promote in my kid? Or, you know, I don't have to worry about that for a while, I would hope, if I do homeschool. But yeah, there's definitely pros and cons of both, and I think it's up to the parents to decide what they think is best for their child. I think we all agree we want the best education for a child, and of course it all starts at home, regardless if you homeschool or go send them to public school or private school. So don't take yourselves for granted if you're parents, and be more active in your child's life and development. And yeah, that includes their education as well as their soul and their emotions and well-being and their moral behavior. But yeah, I guess my question was if parents have been downplayed or not, and I feel like it might come down to that, to recognize that we should not downplay parents and their crucial role in forming these children. Yeah, it's important. Teachers are important, and we hold them high standard because of whose mind they're forming, our children's minds. And hopefully it is an environment that we can entrust our children to, and that they'll be responsible with our trust. Should come down to us entrusting our children's minds and, to a certain degree, their souls to them. And I hope that the teachers recognize that. I feel like there's some that do recognize that, and they just want what's best for our children, and to use their education and skills to the best of their abilities to give the best education they can to children. But ultimately, if they truly want that and understand that, then they'll understand that the primary role that parents play. So thank you for listening, and God love you. Bye.